Hello everyone, viewers. Have you ever wondered what the guardians of God's throne actually look like? Most people picture elegant beings with white robes and feathery wings, strumming harps in a sea of clouds. But what if I told you that the Bible paints a far more terrifying, far more alien picture? Imagine standing by a river, your world shattered, your people in exile. Suddenly the sky doesn't just open, and from the center of this cosmic inferno, four figures emerge. They have the general form of a human, but that's where any sense of familiarity ends. They are chimeras, impossible beings of staggering power. Each one has four faces, the face of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. They have four wings, their legs are straight like pillars, and their feet gleam like burnished bronze, ending not in toe. This is a vision of cosmic horror and incomprehensible majesty. This was what the prophet Ezekiel saw. And this vision holds a secret, a riddle that has echoed through millennia. These four living creatures are more than just strange celestial guards. They are a key, a divine cipher that unlocks the very structure of God's plan for humanity. Today, we're not just telling us, we're going to journey into the heart of this fiery vision and uncover what the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle truly represent. This is a journey that will take us from the despair of ancient Babylon to the throne room of heaven itself, and it will reveal a truth about the four Gospels that is more profound than you can imagine. This is the riddle of the four living creatures. This is just the beginning of this incredible mystery. Let's set the stage. The year is 593 BC. The kingdom of Judah has been crushed. The glorious city of Jerusalem, the heart of their faith, has been ransacked, its temple defiled, and its people dragged hundreds of miles away into forced exile in Babylon. Among them is a young priest named Ezekiel. He is a man of God in a godless land, a spiritual leader with no temple, no altar, and a flock scattered and broken. His people are asking the most painful question a person of faith can ask: has God abandoned us? Is our God weaker than the gods of Babylon? It's a crisis of faith on a national scale. Ezekiel is 30 years old, the age he would have formally begun his priestly service in the Temple of Solomon. But there is no temple, so he sits by the river Chebar, a major irrigation canal in Babylon, surrounded by the sights and it is here, at the absolute lowest point of his life and his people's history, that the heavens tear open. The vision is not a gentle comfort. It is a violent intrusion. The storm, the fire, the lightning. This is the raw, untamed power of the Creator breaking into a world that thinks it is in control. The Babylonians prided themselves on their order, but this vision is a declaration. You have built your empire of brick and mortar, but the true King of the universe travels in a chariot of living fire. Now, let's look closer at these beings at the heart of the storm, the Cherubim. That's what the Bible later identifies them as. Beings of immense importance, stationed to guard the way to the tree of life after Adam and Eve were cast out of Eden. They are beings who exist at the very boundary between the divine and the created, and here they are in Babylon, forming the living chassis of God's mobile throne. The description Ezekiel gives is meticulous, almost like an engineer trying to describe a machine he can't possibly comprehend. He sees their four faces: on the right, the face of a man and a lion; on the left, the face of an ox and an eagle. Each face points in a cardinal direction. Their wings are just as strange. Two wings of each creature stretched upward, touching the wings of the one next to it, forming a square of interconnected power. Their other two wings covered their bodies, a sign of humility and reverence, even for beings of such might. Under their wings, Ezekiel sees something that grounds this celestial vision in a flicker of familiarity: human hands. It's a shocking. These cosmic beings, these chimeras of animal power, possess the hands of a man, suggesting they are not just blind forces of nature, but agents of intelligent, deliberate purpose. They are carrying out the will of the one who sits on the throne above them, and the sound they make, Ezekiel struggles for words. It is like the roar of rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of an army. It is the sound of creation. Beside each of the four living creatures is a wheel, but these are no ordinary wheels. He describes them as a wheel within a wheel, intersecting at right angles, allowing them to move in any of the four directions instantly, without pivoting. Their design is a physical representation of omnipresence and immediate action. They are made of a material that shines like chrysolite, a shimmering, translucent gemstone. And the most unnerving detail of all, the rims of these wheels are tall and terrifying, and they are covered inside and out, with eyes everywhere. Nothing escapes their gaze. The spirit of the living creatures is in the wheels. Where the creatures go, the wheels go. They are a single, unified entity of life, spirit, and motion. They are the Ophanim. The wheels are different together. They form the Merkabah, the divine chariot, throne of God. Above the heads of these four creatures is an expanse, a platform that looks like a sheet of terrible, awe-inspiring ice or crystal. And above this crystalline platform is the shape of a throne, glowing like sapphire, and on the throne, Ezekiel can't even describe it fully. He sees a figure, a form with the appearance of a man, but it's surrounded by a rainbow, the symbol of God's covenant and mercy, a splash of gentle promise amidst a vision of overwhelming, terrifying power. Upon seeing this, Ezekiel does the only thing a mortal can do. He falls on his face in terror and worship. The vision has served its purpose. It is a message not just for Ezekiel, but for all of Israel. God has not abandoned them. His throne is not a static chair of gold and wood. His throne is a living, mobile, all-seeing, all-powerful chariot that can go anywhere in creation. He is here in the heart of their exile, in the center of the pagan empire that holds them captive. The King of the universe has come to visit his people in their darkest hour, but this just deepens the riddle. Why these four faces: a lion, an ox, a man? The Babylonians revered the lion as a symbol of their patron god, Marduk, and their imperial power. Eagles represented gods of the sky. The bull was a universal symbol of strength and fertility, but the combination, the Tetramorph, the four-formed being, was something else entirely. This wasn't just a random collection of powerful animals. This was a statement. Let's break down the code. In the ancient Near East, the lion was the ultimate symbol of royalty, of ferocious power, of untamable strength. Kings adorned their palaces with lion imagery. Armies marched under banners bearing lions. The lion represented raw, sovereign authority in the Bible. This symbolism is powerfully co-opted. God himself is described as a lion who will roar from Zion. In Genesis, the patriarch Jacob, on his deathbed, gives a prophecy over his sons. Of Judah, he says, "Judah is a lion's whelp. The scepter shall not depart from Judah." From that moment on, the Lion of Judah became the symbol of the rightful king, the messianic line from which King David would come, and from which the ultimate king was promised to descend. So when Ezekiel, an exile in Babylon, a land filled with carved images of Mesopotamian lions, sees the lion face on God's throne, the message is electrifying. It is a direct challenge. You think your king Nebuchadnezzar is the lion of this world. You think your empire is the ultimate power. Number the true king, the lion of the tribe of Judah, is on the move. His power is untamed. It's the face of divine government and righteous judgment. Next, the ox, or more accurately, a young bull. If the lion is the king of the wild beasts, the ox is the king of the domestic animals. It represents something entirely different: strength under a yoke. It symbolizes service, sacrifice, and patient labor. The ancient world ran on the power of the ox. It plowed the fields that fed the nations. In the religious life of Israel, the ox held a sacred place. It was the premier animal of sacrifice. When Solomon dedicated the great temple, he sacrificed thousands of oxen. The blood of the bull was shed on the Day of Atonement to cover the sins of the people. The ox represented the atonement that came through the offering of a life, the consecration that came through service. For the exiled Israelites who felt it communicated that God saw their suffering, their toil, but more than that, it dignified it. It showed that service, strength, and sacrifice are not lowly things, but are attributes so holy they have a place at the very throne of God. This face represents the servant aspect of God's character, his strength used for the provision and redemption of his people. Then the most startling face of all, the face of a man in a vision. Humanity in the biblical worldview is the pinnacle of God's earthly creation, made in his very image and likeness. To have the face of a man on the chariot of God is to declare the unique, intimate status of humanity in the cosmic order. The man represents intelligence, reason, emotion, relationship, and creativity. While the lion has strength and the ox has fortitude, only man has the capacity. For Ezekiel and his people, this was a radical affirmation of their value. They were not just slaves in Babylon, they were image, bearers of the God who sits on the throne. This face declared that God's plan, God's work in the world, is intrinsically tied up with humanity. He is not a distant, alien God who has no concern for mankind. He is a God whose very retinue reflects the creature he made. This face represents the wisdom, the reason, and the relational aspect of God's nature, and his special covenant with humanity. Finally, the eagle, the undisputed king of the birds. The eagle soars in realms the lion cannot reach. It sees the world not from the ground, but from the heavens. Its vision is legendary, able to spot its prey from miles away. The eagle represents it is not bogged down in the confusing maze of the world below. It glides above it all on the currents of the wind. In the scriptures, God often compares his own nature and care for Israel to that of an eagle. In Exodus, after freeing them from Egypt, God says, "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." The eagle is a symbol of salvation for a people trapped in the flat river plains of Babylon, dreaming of the mountains of their homeland. The image of the eagle was a promise of swift divine deliverance. It was a reminder that while their perspective was limited, God's was not. He saw the end from the beginning. He had a plan they could not yet comprehend. This face represents the transcendent, all-seeing, and prophetic nature of God. It is the face of you get a perfect composite picture of all creation. You have the king of the wild beasts, the strongest of the domestic beasts, the pinnacle of creation in man, and the ruler of the heavens. It's as if God is declaring that his rule extends over every sphere of life. Nothing is outside his domain. The Tetramorph represents the totality of the created order, all of its facets, wildness, service. It's a vision of ultimate cosmic harmony. But the riddle doesn't end there. For centuries, this vision was a source of awe, mystery, and contemplation for Jewish mystics and scholars. The Merkabah, the chariot, became a central focus of a whole school of mystical thought. To gaze upon the chariot was to gaze upon the very workings of the universe, the interface between heaven and earth. But the vision, like all true prophecy, it contains layers of meaning that unfold over time. Now, let's fast forward nearly 700 years. The world has changed. The Babylonian Empire is long gone, followed by the Persians, the Greeks, and now the mighty Romans rule the known world. The land of Israel is an occupied territory. Another man of God is in exile. He's not a young priest at the beginning of his ministry. He is an old man, the last of the original apostles, exiled by the Roman emperor to the desolate prison island of Patmos for the crime of preaching about a crucified and risen king named Jesus. Like Ezekiel, John is in a place of despair. The church is facing its first great wave of systematic persecution. The followers of Jesus are being hunted, imprisoned. Is the power of Caesar greater than the power of Christ? And it is here, in this place of isolation and suffering, that the heavens open for John. Just as they did for Ezekiel, John is taken up in the Spirit and sees a door standing open in heaven. He hears a voice like a trumpet, saying, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." John enters the very throne room of God. He sees the throne, and the one sitting. There are 24 elders in white robes and golden crowns. There are flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. And then he sees them in the center, around the very throne itself, were 4 living creatures. John's description is both hauntingly similar to Ezekiel's and profoundly different. He says they are covered with eyes, in front and in back, an even more intense depiction of their all-seeing nature. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a face like a man, and the fourth was like a flying eagle. Notice the small but crucial difference in Ezekiel's vision. Each creature had all 4 faces. It was a vision of unified potential, ready to move in any direction. Here in Revelation, each creature embodies one primary aspect. They are no longer they are now stationary attendants in the heavenly court, fixed in their positions around the throne. Their role has also shifted. In Ezekiel, their primary function was movement and carrying the throne. Here, their primary function is worship, day and night. They never stop saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Their worship is contagious when the living creatures give. The four living creatures are the lead worshippers, the conductors of the heavenly chorus. The vision has shifted from one of terrifying mobile power on earth to one of established eternal adoration in heaven. What has happened in those 700 years to cause such a change? The answer is everything. The entire plan of salvation has unfolded. The Lion of the tribe of Judah has come. The great sacrificial ox, the work that was foreshadowed in Ezekiel's vision, has been accomplished. The throne is no longer a mobile chariot bringing judgment and hope to an exiled nation, but a permanent seat of victory from which the slain and risen Lamb now reigns. This is a monumental shift, but the final layer of the riddle, the one that ties everything together, was yet to be fully understood. It took the wisdom of the early church, reflecting on the life of Christ and the scriptures he had fulfilled, to crack the final part of the code. A man named Irenaeus, a bishop in the 2nd century, was one of the first to articulate it clearly. He looked at the four living creatures described in both Ezekiel and Revelation, and he looked at the four accounts of Jesus' life that the church had accepted as scripture, the Gospels, of a divine parallel so perfect it could not be a coincidence. He proposed that the four living creatures were not just symbols of God's character or his creation, but were a divine prophecy, a spiritual blueprint for the four ways the story of the Son of God would be presented to the world. The Holy Spirit, in inspiring the four gospel writers, had tailored each account to reveal a specific face of Jesus, and it's the solution to the entire mystery. Consider the Gospel of Matthew. It is traditionally associated with the creature with the face of a man. Why? How does Matthew begin his gospel? He starts with a genealogy. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It is a painstaking, detailed list of human ancestors. Matthew's primary goal is to present Jesus as the promised Messiah, the rightful King of the Jews. But he does so by firmly rooting him in human history. His is the most Jewish of the Gospels, filled with references to Jesus as the Son of Man, fulfilling the prophecies of the Hebrew Scriptures. Matthew emphasizes Jesus' teachings, his moral authority, his wisdom as the new Moses delivering. He presents a rational, authoritative, yet deeply human king. He is the perfection of humanity, the ideal man. The face of the man on the cherubim represents wisdom, intellect, and humanity in God's image. The Gospel of Matthew is the perfect literary embodiment of this face, presenting the story of the Son of God through the lens of his perfect humanity and rightful claim as the Son of Man. Now, let's turn to it wastes no time with genealogies or nativity stories. It explodes onto the scene with John the Baptist, a wild man in the desert, a voice roaring like a lion, "Prepare the way of the Lord." And then Jesus appears, and the pace is relentless. The word "immediately" is used over and over. Jesus strides through Galilee with unparalleled power and authority. He commands demons, and they obey. He challenges the corrupt authorities in the temple. This is not a gentle teacher. This is a powerful, authoritative king, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, taking command. Mark's Gospel portrays Jesus' divine power and kingship in its rawest form. The lion on the cherubim represents royalty, untamable power, and sovereign authority. The Gospel of Mark is the roar. Next, we have the Gospel of Luke, which has always been associated with the ox Luke. The meticulous doctor presents a different portrait of Jesus. His gospel is filled with a unique sense of compassion for the poor, the outcast, the sinner. He emphasizes Jesus' service to others, but the key connection to the ox, the animal of sacrifice, is Luke's intense focus on the road to Jerusalem and the atonement. Furthermore, the gospel begins and ends in the temple, the place of sacrifice. It starts with the priest Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, serving at the altar of incense. It is a priestly, sacrificial context from the very first chapter. Jesus in Luke is the great high priest, the one who bears the yoke of humanity's sin and willingly lays down his life. He is the ultimate servant. The ox on the cherubim represents service, sacrifice, and the strength to bear a heavy load. Luke's gospel is the story of that great sacrifice, the account of the divine servant who came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Finally, there is the Gospel of John, and its connection is perhaps the most breathtaking. John is associated with the eagle, just as the eagle. It doesn't begin with a genealogy, a desert prophet, or a temple scene. It begins before time itself. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John doesn't walk you up to the truth of Jesus' divinity. He takes you to the highest heaven and shows you Jesus on the throne with the Father from the very first sentence. His perspective is not from the ground up. Jesus' famous "I am" statements. I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Add declarations of divinity that echo God's own revelation to Moses. John's gospel is the eagle's eye view of salvation history. The eagle on the cherubim represents transcendence, divine perspective, and a connection to the heavenly realm. The Gospel of John is that vision made manifest, a soaring, majestic account of the divine Son of God who descended from heaven and ascended back again. So the riddle is solved. The four living creatures are a heavenly prophecy of the fourfold gospel. The vision given to Ezekiel in the depths of despair was not just a message of God's presence and power, but a secret foreshadowing of how the story of It's a divine signature, an authentication of the Gospels written into the very fabric of heaven. Think about the perfection of this design. You don't get the full picture of Jesus from just one Gospel. If you only had Mark, you might see him only as a king of power. If you only had Luke, you might see him only as a humble sacrifice. If you only had Matthew, you'd focus on his human perfection and teaching. You need the kingly lion, the sacrificial ox, the perfect man, and the divine eagle together. The four Gospels, like the four faces of the cherubim, present one unified, complete portrait of the Son of God. They move together without turning, each providing a unique perspective, but all focused on the same central reality: Jesus Christ. The creatures Ezekiel saw as a unified being with four faces became the four distinct angelic beings John saw around the throne, just as the one life of Christ was later presented through four distinct but unified scriptural accounts. The prophecy was fulfilled. This revelation changes how we see everything. It tells us that the story of Jesus wasn't a plan B. It wasn't the plan of salvation, in all its multifaceted glory, was present in the mind of God and symbolized at his very throne from ages past. The four beings who lead the chorus of Holy, Holy, Holy in heaven are the very same beings whose natures would define the telling of the story of the Lamb who was slain, the only one worthy to open the scroll and redeem creation. What does this mean for us today, living thousands of years after? His story is not simple. It is a rich, complex tapestry woven through all of history. It invites us to look at the world through four lenses at once, to see Christ in his royal authority over our lives, the lion, to live our lives in service and sacrifice to others, following the example of the ox, to cherish our humanity, our reason, and our relationships as reflections of God's image, the man, and to never lose. The riddle of the four living creatures is not just an interesting piece of biblical trivia. It is an invitation to gaze, like Ezekiel and John, upon the throne of God, to be overwhelmed by his majesty, to be comforted by his presence, and to be transformed by the fourfold story of his Son. It is a story written in the stars, declared by the prophets, and lived out on the dusty roads of Galilee. A story guarded and proclaimed by the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle. All right, that is all for today's video. If you liked this video, please subscribe and give it a like to support us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.